Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Oh, welcome everybody to another episode of MSP 1337. This week I'm joined by Jim Harryman of Kinetic Technology Group. Jim, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Chris.
So it's that time to talk about things that we aren't necessarily all that familiar with, but it's plaguing our mere existence. Let's talk about the risks of AI, and maybe not the traditional model of what you kind of see in the media right now, like fill in the blank product that's the next chat GPT, but more of like, especially from a professional side, like a company organizational side, more work environment versus consumer side. I can think of lots of reasons that consumers will or won't use chat GPTs, and I don't necessarily have a whole lot of concern about that, because unless you're feeding it very sensitive information, whatever. But in the context of this, I want to talk about the risks of AI and the impacts that it might have on your organization. Like, what are the things that we should be wary of? And for those listening, in an upcoming Secure Outcomes town hall, we have slated to talk about the risks of AI and things that you might use. And so maybe today, let's look at it through the lens of like, AI is attached to vendors, right? Like, it's not something that I've built internally to my organization, probably. So thinking about the risks of AI is probably an extension of evaluating a vendor. And so maybe I've stretched too far, but Jim, like, talk to me a little bit about, like, if you were evaluating a vendor tomorrow, what that might look like. And then I'll add some things that I might want to consider if I knew that they were also using AI as part of their product offering.
First off, I think that evaluating a vendor is a ever-evolving process, right?
Right.
I mean, for us, it has been just, do you meet these 1, 2, 3, 4 criteria, to now it's a much longer list, morphing into probably a questionnaire coming this year from us to our vendors in the future, right? So,
Right.
I mean, it's just it's a ever-evolving process for us. And so as it relates to AI, man, it's, yes, absolutely, you have to take all those things into consideration, and the risks are just mind-blowing. I just, even thinking about all the risks with AI and data getting uploaded and
Right.
access. I mean, it all goes back to what we talk about regularly, you and I, and the groups that we are involved with.
Where did my data just go? Like, you ask that
Well,
question and you're like,
data management, right?
Yeah.
Data management, CIS controls on data management, and categorization, and all those things that go into place. I was reading something the other day about, I guess it was a Microsoft related study that, like 1% of the administrative rights that are given are actually used within the cloud structures, right?
Yeah.
And less than, I don't even remember the stat, but an amazing amount of organizations that don't have any type of data management really in place, and that just freaks me out, but we look at it as opportunity in our industry, right? So, I mean, at least I do.
Well,
And so
so right on that, Jim, just think about the conversation we had. Literally, I think this was in the last, I'm going to say in the last 10 days. I think it was in the last 10 days. I think it was one of the last Monday of the month calls. The conversation that brought up privileged access controls.
Sure.
And fill in the blank cloud vendor. I struggling with, like, I have 6 pages of permissions to navigate that I can modify and make changes to, but the reality is it doesn't actually create a net new privileged access user type. It just has modified the permissions for that individual user. So the question was, like, does that count? Like, how do I articulate that with, the vendor that I'm referring to, I've got 25 employees or 2 employees or however many it is, and they all have 25 varying degrees of permissions that are, unless I go in and look at each user, I have no idea what they are. And so
Right.
we were all kind of in agreement. Like, I think I would just say that's a vendor that we classify as privileged access for anybody that's assigned that access to that cloud service is in that category. And I think, kind of to your point, isn't that the fundamental challenge in this is like the unknown of like, okay, if the vendor uses AI, is that disclosed? If the vendor uses AI to deliver data to a third party, is that being disclosed? And now you're going down this rabbit hole of like, at this point, can I use any vendor because I haven't clarified for each one of them where my data might or might not go
Right.
and what they're doing?
It just, I mean, a particular radio host that I used to listen to would talk about getting the duct tape and wrapping it around your head so it doesn't explode, and
You
all
put
the
your own
things
Faraday
that
cage on
like,
your own brain.
yeah, I just there are just so many things, man. So many things. Like, you think about, I mean, going into we hear a lot about what the co-pilot stuff with Microsoft, right? I mean, that is a good place to start in how this could impact us as managed service providers. It could impact our clients. Just somebody goes in and turns something on, then we're like, well, crap, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, just the things that we don't know yet, I mean, what is the audit trail of all this stuff? How is that impacting our ability to, find things
Yeah.
that may have gone wrong? The mistakes that can be made with the data being generated, is additional sensitive information being generated and categorized at that moment, right? I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's just mind blowing.
No, it's funny you say that. So I was thinking about some of the recent changes we've seen, like with Chat GPT. So like I know our work at CompTIA, we have an internal version of it, and now when you type stuff in, it actually now kicks back where it got the information from to generate what it's providing you. Which like when we first started using it, it just was like, boom, here you go. And I was like, wow, Chat GPT is really smart. It created all this content for me from out of thin air based on what information it was fed. And we obviously know that it's not that great, right? But along those same lines, like I think about when we leverage vendors for any stretch of the imagination, what does it do with our data? Forget the AI for a minute. And I don't know that we've ever really, until we started having these conversations around security safeguards and talking through like the things that we should expect from our vendors or the things that our clients should expect from us, did we really spend very much time talking through this? And like forget the whole like I can come up with 12 or 15 or 20 data classification types. Let's just talk about the three easy ones: public, sensitive, and then like sensitive private or something along those lines where you don't have to get, you can probably pretty easily classify data when you have three or four categories to put them in those buckets. But do we do that with our vendors? Do we really ask those questions, or do we, and I'm not saying this like, oh, vendors bad, like we should ask better questions, but more of like, because of AI, we've started and the awareness around, say, the trust mark and like CIS and other frameworks where we're maturing our organizations based on a set of standards. Are we asking the right questions? And then I think AI amplified that because suddenly it's, should AI what are the risks or the challenges that we need to be aware of when we're evaluating a vendor that might be using something that's quite honestly an unknown?
Yeah, man.
Maybe we should have a different topic. Yeah, like I just realized I kind of felt like I went in a circle. Or like, what are the ramifications for forget security for a minute and just thinking about like I think it was the New York Times that's has filed suit against ChatGPT for not
Right.
having permission to scrape the data that's behind a gated community. And so like that asks two questions. Well, wait a second. if your data was secured properly, ChatGPT wouldn't have had access to just go behind the gate. Like it's like the you see the picture where like we put a security gate in and like the sidewalk goes on either side of the gate.
Right. Oh my goodness, dude. I just it is just so it's all just so overwhelming. And we can sit here
Right, right.
and chase our tails all over this topic because it is just so vast, and so many unknowns and so many just golly, just so many rabbit trails to chase potentially.
So we could focus on the things we do know and we could use them to apply it to this, right? So like let's go back to how we kind of started and we really didn't answer this question. We should all have a vendor evaluation sheet, right? So like I am looking at doing business with fill in the blank vendor because they're going to solve my backup problem or whatever it might be. Start there. Like Jim, what does the process look like for you? And I don't mean like it changes. I think the process itself doesn't necessarily change as much as the questions that might be included in that
Correct.
evaluation.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, like I said, I mean, our list of things has morphed over the last several years. And I think that um, when it comes to our service provider evaluations, I mean, and you get into this, for instance, I mean, going back to the Microsoft Copilot thing, right? I mean,
Sure.
we're a company my size is not going to be sending Microsoft a vendor evaluation for them to fill out and and basically respond to me, right?
Well, let's be
In most
careful.
circumstances.
Okay. So let's tone it down a little bit. So like vendor evaluation, Kinetic evaluates their vendors. It doesn't necessarily mean you're sending the vendor a questionnaire,
Correct.
right? So many of these vendors
Absolutely.
have, yeah. So to be fair, this isn't like because Microsoft is the giant, we're not going to try and get them on the phone when they don't answer support phone calls, right? Like, but in fairness, when you are looking at a vendor, you ask questions like, um, do they send data to third party? You might ask yourself that question. You're like, what APIs do they allow? Is it an open API? Is it a REST API? Does it involve encapsulating all of the tunneled traffic? Does it allow me to distinguish between what is or isn't being sent? Like, what's support look like for technical issues? What kind of escalation path do we have? Like, more of your generic general
all of
questions.
all
All of
of those
them.
all of those things are have become the standard for
Right.
what we use as an evaluation, right? So I think when we get into the AI discussion, the unknowns for me right now are basically it's just like we are not as an organization going to be using this except from a an experimental practice, right? I mean,
Probably
we're
more from a consumption standpoint than a participate in generating content for something else.
exactly. So now that is us. I know for a fact that I have vendors, particularly in the marketing side of things, that are using,
Sure.
you know, the language models to build out certain things for my marketing processes,
And you're like,
right?
more power to them if
Content
it
and
lowers my
right.
price and it solves the problem, right?
Precisely. You hope it
Yeah.
does that. So getting back to the larger issue for me, and uh, I think the when I was reading this survey and everything the other day, it was like, well, everything. I'm going back to the Microsoft deal with Copilot.
Yeah.
It's you know everything is segregated, tenanted. It's only going to affect you, so you shouldn't have to worry about things getting interwoven with other
Right.
things. So when it says
Dirty
shouldn't,
data, essentially.
right. When it says shouldn't, that bothers me,
Right.
right? Shouldn't is not a definitive,
Right.
won't,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm
I'm
like,
not
okay,
going to do that, maybe.
right. I just that's where it all gets down to me, where I'm like, with our staff, it's been like, look, we're going to test some things. We're going to do some things sparingly. If we get encountered with a client that is wanting to do this kind of stuff, let's sit down and have a
Yeah.
conversation with them before we start enabling these things to use, because there are going to be implications of that. Back to the vendor thing, I think that it has to be added into the scope of what we're doing
Yeah.
on the evaluation side, because if it's not, I mean, look, lots of our vendors have been using some AI for
Oh,
years
for sure.
to do lots of different things, right? So it's just now, it's all
Uh,
just
I'll give you an example of an
forefront of
AI that
mind at
I've
this
used for years. It's called Meter. And all it does is it looks at my calendars and it highlights and identifies so that I don't have to go into the calendar item to click on the link. That's which one is the right link to click on, to then have it open a browser tab, to then have it ask me if I want to launch the native application. It skips all of that. So you can call that whatever level of sophisticated AI you want to call it, but it is doing that dynamically. It is reading what
Sure.
it sees, and lo and behold, I found out that I believe it's part of the, I want to say Bardine, which is kind of an affiliated with like the Google Bard project, but it literally is using an AI algorithm to look at what's there to determine that's Teams, that's Google Meet, et cetera, right? That's me consuming something that's really pretty closed, right? Like it's a very it's running on my desk. It's not like maturing over time because it's pulling stuff from the internet. It literally just looks at my calendar and says, if you click here and the app's open, it will launch it.
Right.
The things that concern me aren't even really all that crazy when it comes to the chat GPT cycles. I think it's more along the lines of like, do I know what this app actually has the capability of doing, and where is it collecting data from to help me make a decision? Like the
Right.
garbage in, garbage out. So like I'll give an example of another one that's super simple in my mind. It's called, I don't even remember the name of it. I can just tell you what it does. I upload, say, this podcast, and it takes the podcast and tells me based on having listened to the episode, and then can extrapolate from that and give me recommendations of what it thinks would make sense as LinkedIn statements to promote this episode. Well, that's actually way better than probably what I could come up with on my own time, because that would take me a long time to do that, to go back, listen to the episode and go, okay, like in 10 words or less or something along those lines, create a statement that I can post like 120 characters or whatever it is, and actually have it be put in front of someone who is making a decision as to whether or not they should listen to this episode. And I think that is a very powerful use of AI. It's self-contained, right? Like I don't care what
Sure.
it's doing with the audio, really. It's not anything in there that's sensitive, and it's giving me something meaningful back. Now, if we were talking about how I'm building out an application that may involve like the, aeronautics in a fighter jet, and I'm struggling with solving a problem, I probably don't want to just go and use an open chat GPT and ask it like, hey, I'm really struggling with this section of code. Can you point me in the right direction? That's probably not a good use of the resource. I mean, it might give you the answer, but your
Right.
code is now also out there on the internet.
Exactly. I think ultimately for me, it all goes back to, working a program on security and how we're going to do this. I think if we have a good set of standards in place in our organization to try and stay ahead of the things that are coming. And it doesn't mean that the controls might not change, that things
Sure.
might be added in as technology evolves, which it always does. But I do think that if we have a program in place, when it comes to this, it's like, look, we need to make users and people aware of
Yeah.
what the impact, the risks, and everything of using AI can be, regardless of what it is, right? Being able to monitor the activity of the use of that
Sure.
tool within your organization, right? Being
Yeah.
able to manage and categorize and classify the data that you have so that something that's sensitive doesn't get leaked out, or new sensitive data isn't created and put in
Right.
an in the wrong location, right? And then strengthening up, back to another conversation that we've had in the past, browser security, right?
Right.
And things of that nature that is not always an easy task to do and to implement and to manage. And
Well, and
so
AI being built into it now, like we're no
exactly.
longer like how many things do we use today that has AI natively built in? And I'm not quite sure there are like, oh, if you would like to go into privacy and settings, you can toggle the little thing off that says don't use AI. Like I don't know
Right.
that that's realistic anymore. I think about the cost that it must be to maintain search engines, especially search engines that are really filtering out like the you can pay to be ranked higher, all these things that they're going to use AI to help determine so that they don't have to pay somebody to do that for. Remember back in the day when it was like you typed in your search criteria and you were pretty certain there was somebody on the other end going, "Oh, we should give them these results."
No kidding.
It's like concierge for a search engine. So in the time that we have left, I'd like to do this. I would like to talk through how one might approach or like things that you might need to put in place. So I'll throw one out there that I think is super easy. Like in your acceptable use, I don't want to say policy, but in your acceptable use section of your employee handbook, there should definitely be some language around what is appropriate in using GPT or LLM, large language models. And you need to do this with in such a way that it's not like you can't use them at all. Because the reality is then you've just set yourself up for failure because we just articulated like, well, it's built into your browser. And you're also going to have the scenario of like, well, what happens if they didn't know that there was an LLM involved in what they are using? How do you address that? So that'd be the first one that I would throw out there is have some language that acknowledges you recognize that it exists. You want people to take advantage of tools and resources that help them be more effective with their jobs, but at the same time, it's not a free for all. You're not just out there like whatever one you want to use is fine.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the education aspect of that, making sure, encouraging them not to just rely on the output that
Right.
they're getting. And, like you said, acceptable use. Here's
Right.
how we expect you to utilize this
Sure.
technology and so on and so forth. But at the same time, being cautious about what is being reported back to you when it's generating content, especially if there's sensitive data involved, right?
Right.
So
Which kind of goes to the second one. You might actually need a policy specifically tied to risk around AI,
certainly.
or at least how you evaluate the products and services that you as an organization are using and consuming. Because obviously we understand we're not going to get rid of all of them. What does that look like?
Right. And full of, in all candor, I mean, we have not established that yet in our own organization. We've discussed it. It's on our docket to put into place, but it has all been really just, hey, don't do this, right? I mean, we've
Right.
given certain people certain access to do some testing, but it's been very limited up to this point, though I know that by and large, there's probably other activity that is going
Yeah.
on. But it does, at least we know that it doesn't have anything to do with the data that we're managing at the moment. So that's the good news. But that's yeah.
So I had this so we have a risk application evaluation form. So it's not just for AI. It's more of like when you evaluate vendors that might be using AI, and obviously the vendor could be AI only, and well, that's a whole nother conversation. But they wrote this in, and I thought it is worth saying. It says AI tech adds an additional layer of use and complexity along with uncertainty. Integration of company data, offering, say, black box text or text, black box tech. I can't speak, black box tech, and the speed of development create a number of unknowns that beg the questions that are designed that in this questionnaire were designed to help. So like questions like does this AI use a third-party AI tool to help with the AI that they're doing, right? Or questions like how is the data controlled and monitored? And I think at the end of the day, and what I think is interesting about this is forget the AI for a moment. Aren't these questions that we should be asking about any vendor or client that we're going to work with? Does the client need data from us that we haven't provided them, that or should we provide them? Is the client giving us data that we should or shouldn't be storing on their behalf? Like, does this create a liability that's not necessary, right? Like, we take on risk every day when we onboard clients, but like, is it a necessary risk? And so then that got me into like what they had for what we kind of built out as this profile or this template, evaluation template. And it has questions like, a risk evaluation of no risk is 0 and severe risk is a 5. And then you add in things like risk multipliers, like if it's collecting data about staff or clients or intellectual property, well, that risk multiplier might be a lot higher. And so then that got me going down this rabbit hole. Okay, have I done a risk evaluation of my organization to determine across these areas where my multipliers need to be bigger because the impact is far more significant, regardless? So it could be the risk evaluation has a score of 2, but my multiplier is a 9
Right.
versus the severity is a 5, but my multiplier is a 0 or a 1. All of a sudden, you see like how some of these things can actually balance themselves out. So like it just got me thinking like, okay, A, we need a policy. B, you probably need Mike Stewart, Anchor Networks, their like vendor evaluation form that's 25 pages. Um, But along those lines, what are your thoughts, Jim? I mean, I feel like we could go further. We've talked about email browsing and or sorry, email security and web browser security, which I think goes hand in hand with this because now we suddenly introduce the fact that like, wait a second, what is Firefox or Edge or Chrome or what are they doing and what AI are they using? Do I need to reevaluate what we allow in our organization from a browser standpoint as a result of this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, as far as other tactics or areas that we could focus on besides those, I mean, I think you start getting into probably a higher level of, data loss prevention, right? I mean, of the DLP philosophies and technologies that exist, but not to a great degree to the smaller market, smaller business market that we typically traverse, right? I mean, that can get pretty extensive and expensive
Right,
when you start going that route. Now, granted, both Microsoft and Google have those types of capabilities within the infrastructure that they have
right.
to limit that, but that only goes so far, and so you get into further endpoint protection type things, software to do that. So I think that is another area that I think we're going to be seeing more
Sure.
of, and hopefully see more accessibility in the small business market. That's what I'm hopeful for, because I think it's pretty limited at this point.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's funny we're focusing on risk, which I think I somewhat tried to cram a square peg into a round hole, as we both are considered highly trained and highly knowledgeable on everything that is AI, which is obviously why we decided to have this conversation today. But the thing that comes to mind for me is going back to the fundamentals or the basics that we've been doing through CIS, through the trust mark, fill in the blank. And that is, have you done a risk assessment? Have you done a third-party vendor management risk profile? Do you know have you done data classification? Like I think about like the 6 or 7 things that we've all kind of come to the conclusion that you have to be doing. And I think acceptable use policy is just continuing to get a little bit bigger and bigger, kind of every time we turn around. I remember what Mike said about like, I need to have a BYOD policy. I'm like, dude, you need to have a statement in your acceptable use policy about BYOD. And that's probably it, because you're not going to
Right.
get rid of it. Like you just can't make it go away. But I think you can really narrowly define a BYOD scope so that things that kind of goes hand in hand with the AI stuff, like, hey, I don't care maybe if you're accessing email. I'm using this loose as example. Like maybe on your personal phone, you can access through the app that you can download and you can get to your work email. But maybe I have it set up so you can't really do anything with it other than reply to email. You can't print, you can't do attachments, whatever. that might be the extent, right? So like we've allowed BYOD, but we haven't allowed BYOD to just be anything. And I think that's far easier to define than to say no personal devices, period. And then they go, well, how am I supposed to do my token generator that I need to use for authenticating for, all right, we're getting you your own phone. Like you can continue to domino this for always and forever and come up with scenarios over and over and over again that would put you in a position of like, come on, don't you understand the BYOD policy is no BYOD? And it's like, well, if I give you BYOD that is allowed, it's very much an easier position to say, then it's assumed that if it's not in here, I shouldn't do it.
Right. I
And I
mean,
think this, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna. I mean, in our organization, we have a BYOD policy that is that there is no BYOD. We issue devices to every staff member, phones,
Right.
tablets, laptops, everything. Right.
But 10 years
So,
ago, you didn't.
no, you're right. 10 years ago, we didn't.
And I think so to that, I think as an organization grows, the ability to deliver on no BYOD becomes realistic. But I also know of scenarios that can happen. What happens if your laptop is just gets fried for whatever reason? Not we'll just say it was because of natural disaster, like dumped water on it.
Sure.
Hey, until we can get you another computer, we've modified the profile. You're allowed to remote in from this personal device that is getting you to window X, right? Like even though you can say no to all things BYOD, that's I think the flip side is you can always find a reason to justify it. So like if you don't have a very clear picture as to, I always think like if you do like this part is allowed, the person who's reading that says that means nothing else is allowed. But if I say no BYOD is allowed at all, they're like, yeah, but what about this scenario? What about this scenario? I
Right.
just think we create our own scenarios that just go on and on and on solely because of that.
Oh, for sure. It's again, it's a rabbit trail. I think that, our stance on it is, what it's been. And, we try and take into account all those things, but I think all those different exceptions could come into play at any given
And you
point, and
cross those bridges
probably
when you
have,
get there,
right?
right? So I got one to
Yeah.
stump you then. So what about browsers? Are those not devices? And if I load Firefox on my Mac and it's not one of the browsers that say is or isn't in my software inventory list, how do you cross that bridge?
Well, I mean, we evaluate that stuff pretty much monthly in our organization. So, I mean, we do have restrictions set. We do have an approved list of applications that are usable. If somebody were to be able to load something that wasn't, we would see that it would, granted, it would take a month for
Okay,
us
so I
to
have the
see that,
approved
but
browser, but I logged in with my personal profile to sync all my bookmarks. Now what?
now what? Now see, now you're getting all technical on
So the
me.
reason why I brought that up though, in the context of BYOD, is like, remember when the last time was that we talked about browsers? Most of the time you don't think of browsers as a device and you don't think about it in the BYOD
Correct.
context. And so I just wanted to throw that out there at the end of this to think about like AI and all these other pieces that we're navigating to say, hey, for those of you listening, this is not easy. The world we're living in is changing. A browser is now considered a device. So take that for what it's worth. I'm not sure how you physically touch it and feel it kind of thing, but it's real.
It is its own operating system for
Right.
sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, living on a shared device, but it is.
With embedded applications inside it. Like, yeah. Man, we can like I know we've done that one multiple times. I know it's been talked about, but again, I don't know that we've ever done it in the context. My browser is my device and you can't take it from me. Good luck prying it from my cold dead. Oh wait, it doesn't matter. You can't touch it. Um, Jim, this was great.
Okay.
I really appreciate you taking the time. This conversation was really meant to spark the thought process around your plans or anybody's plans that's listening to this about AI. It's never too late to start. Hopefully, many of you have something in place that is at least educating. We could have done a whole episode on how do you educate your staff on AI and how to use it appropriately, but maybe that's an episode for a future
Yeah, when you run this one through that AI tool that you were talking about,
See
the
if it makes some
podcast, it'll come back and
suggestions.
it'll say,
Yeah.
Jim Harryman doesn't really know anything about AI, which I
Neither do
don't. And
I.
I
Yeah.
told you that
Right.
when you asked me to
Right.
come
I
on
like
here. It's like,
this is very validating. This obviously used source material that's true to give me an output that also validates the source. I mean, this
there you
what
go.
better? Obviously, they've got this all figured out. So
That's right.
for those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.